everything. Actually, what he done is isolate the phosphorus in urine, and phosphorus glows with this color. So he discovered phosphorus, but he was looking for the first matter. And I don't know how much the connection between discoveries in chemistry are. We know that sometimes what you expect occurs in an experiment, especially in atomic physics. And, I think it was an amazing synchronicity.
This phosphorus you're talking about, I have been at the ocean before. Does the Earth make it? Because I have been in the ocean where I had some waves come in and it would glow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cloudy night, there's no light whatsoever, but these waves coming in, it would actually glow. So the Earth would make it?
Yeah.
No, it's living plants and water. It's called bioluminescent plankton. They're microscopic little organisms. And when you touch them and jostle them, they're like, let off I don't know if it's phosphorus, but it's similar to microscopic fireflies.
Okay.
And so when the wave curls over, it causes an agitation, and that causes them to light themselves up.
Okay.
But seawater is another source of first matter. If you distill it, you get some salts that are really important. So, what we're talking about, what is common to both science and alchemy and hermetic sciences, is the idea that there is two realities. That there is a higher reality or a spiritual reality or an energetic reality that determines our reality. And it's outside our ways of testing and understanding. But in meditation, you can get there. And there are archetypes here, there are structures, there are all kinds of things that are bizarre and understandable because they're all based on energy. And energy is constantly changing and reforming. In science, we actually have discovered where this boundary is. We know where the above and the below are at. And we know that this area over here is pure energy, and this first matter, it can be determined to what you observe here, what your consciousness is projected here, occurs in the real world, or in the material world. And this boundary is in space and time, it's located at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, or 10 to the minus 43 seconds. So if you go smaller than 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, or into a time space less than 10 to the minus 43, you are there. You are in that area. And a lot of atomic experiments take place here. And that's where a lot of groundbreaking research is taking place now. It's called the Planck barrier, or the Planck level of existence, after Max Planck, who was a very spiritual guy who was very interested in alchemy. He took a lot of principles. He changed us. He discovered quantum physics and connected the idea that mind influences matter, and that's the barrier. He discovered that, and it's a real place. That's the important thing to understand. Yeah.
So I've seen and read studies about quantum physics experiments, and like you were saying before, based on what they think or expect, like the particles will change. Basically. Is that happening in that space or on the other side?
No, that's happening in that space. That's the observer effect, and where what you expect is what turns out. This is called the quantum foam. So it contains all possibilities, and it's not determined until consciousness affects it in some way, or the experiment affects it in some way. And there's also another principle here, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where shows that we cannot totally know this area because we cannot measure, we cannot observe more than one thing at once, and we cannot measure both the speed and mass in different aspects of particles. So Heisenberg proved what proved on the physical level, what Gödel proved in mathematics, that our knowledge cannot extend into this area, that it's not knowable. But consciousness here is a force that changes this area.
Is that what they call the veil?
Yeah, the veil in the mystical traditions, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how to get there in meditation.
I meditate a lot, and I have experienced a lot of strange things, especially since I've been doing constantly for over many years now, and I've had an experience where I'm physically here, but somewhere else too. I'm in two different places at once. Is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah, it's projecting your consciousness. Your body doesn't go in this area, but consciousness does for some reason.
Yeah.
Or light. No, we're actually talking about
Okay,
light.
now the light you're talking about, pure white light.
The purest light is the white light, yeah.
Okay, I've been there.
Yeah. I believe you have. A lot of people have. And there's ways of getting there deliberately, too.
Now, is the veil getting thinner as time's going on?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know how to really answer it except to say that by us knowing about the veil, knowing where it's at, it is getting thinner. Because knowledge unveils the veil. And this is, so it's all about light. Lots of pictures about the light from the one line coming down into our reality. And go to that. But I wanted to explain something about light that a lot of people miss. The light of mind is the same thing as the light we're talking about in the real world. And light carries information, and that's hard for people to grasp. Bundled up in light in physics is tons and tons of information. A lot of it we don't know what it means. But light, we know that light is actually a fuller spectrum. It goes from infrared to ultraviolet. And so our cell phones work on light, information is changed, your text messages are coming to you by light, our TVs are coming to us by light. Light carries information, that's the characteristic of light. The problem with light is that it's mercury in alchemy. And mercury is the great rebus, you know, the two-headed thing with two faces that shows a different face every time you look at it. And in physics that's true too. Light has this unusual ability to be both matter and energy, to appear as a wave, which is energy, or a particle. Like Descartes was the first one to perform experiments to prove that light was wave-like or energetic, and Newton was the first one to prove in his experiments that light was corpuscular, his corpuscular theory of light, that it was particles. But in truth, and Newton knew this, light is both of those things, and it wasn't until Einstein proved it that he proved that light consists of changes. It can present itself as energy or waves and present itself as particles or matter. It's the one thing that bridges energy and matter, spirit and material things. And that the light of our mind has those same characteristics is very important now. Newton was such a genius. He knew in his writings and in his study in alchemy, it's a very clear principle in alchemy, that light consisted of both waves and particles. But he was afraid to publish it because of the ridicule he would have received for such an outlandish idea. But lots of comments in his writings, like the changing of bodies into light and light into bodies, is very comfortable to the course of nature, which seems delighted in such transformation. And he knew it. He knew that light sometimes appears as waves and particles, yet afraid to, and he knew it from his alchemical work. So the basic principle of discovering the first matter and discovering the essence of anything is solve et coagula. It's a short phrase from solve te corpora et coagulata spiritus. In other words, it says dissolve the body, dissolve the matter, and coagulate the spiritus, the spirit or the energy that's there. Once you have the energy, you can convert it back into matter. So there's this process of extracting the essence, the light, from something by destroying it, or the natural process of destroying things releases essences. The aging of all of us destroys us in many ways through our failures and just growth. And what's left is our essence. Whatever's left over is as bad as and uncomfortable as it is. There's something hidden in there that's very good for us to work with. And the idea is to dissolve it, to destroy it as completely as possible. Bring it up into what's left is just the essence, the tiniest little spark, and then to bring that back and create what you want through it consciously. And so you always end up in alchemy here in the real world. You don't stay in heaven. You don't stay at the Planck level. You come back, like in Buddhism. You always come back to the earth where you do the work to further transform and further spiritize matter. This is the symbol we were talking about at the center, the stone. This is the monad, the hieroglyphic monad. I won't go into it a lot, but John Dee, who's a mathematician and a magician, perfect guy, one of my heroes. And this symbol, which in the Middle Ages a lot of alchemists had tattooed on their bodies, because they believed that if you drop this symbol, this cipher, into a vat of first matter, it would become the world as it is today. And they had it tattooed on them. They had it tattooed on themselves. The idea is when they're burned up, that you will still be there, that there's still a possibility of coming back. And so, the symbol itself, he was an expert in Euclidean geometry. He's responsible for you taking geometry in high school, because Euclidean geometry wasn't known until he brought it back to Europe. And he used it, which is really sacred geometry. Euclidean geometry is very different from other geometries. Recently, we discovered, scientists have discovered that the basic geometry of the universe is not Riemann geometry or not any of these weird, unusual topologies. It's Euclidean geometry. That when the universe is looked at as a whole, Euclidean geometry is the one that applies throughout time and space, which is really an unexpected conclusion. So Euclidean geometry is also the basis of sacred geometry, and the pyramids and the cathedrals. And he used Euclidean geometry to create this perfect symbol, which is a combination of all the planets. Here's the sun, of course, and Venus is this circle with the plus, and Mars comes down with the pointed arrow at the end. The duplicity of Jupiter and Saturn, or lead and tin, are shown here. Here's a symbol for lead, and on this side, but it's also in a mirror image seen here on this side. And the same thing's true of the symbol for tin, which is here, the symbol for tin, and then in the mirror image here, it's on this side, so it goes in different ways. The arrangement of these elements and symbols is very significant, and unfortunately we can't read John Dee and understand it because he's such a mathematical thing. But it's a great symbol to meditate on, as are all the alchemical drawings. They're all meant for meditation. And the operations of alchemy are usually concealed in alchemical drawings. Here they are as steps to the stone of the philosophers. They're scrambled steps. This one, Basil Valentine, actually showed the steps in the correct order. And you're probably all familiar with this Azoth drawing, because I know Jeff uses his teachings. But it's basically the operations of alchemy that you go through to transform the first matter into gold, change lead into gold, or create the stone. And it starts with the calcination phase. Calx is the white skull, is a symbol of that calcination phase. The symbol here, the first step, it's even numbered for you, it's lead. And the second step, tin or dissolution, picking apart from the solution what's good and what's saving. Mars is the separation operation, pulling apart the pieces, like in the lab would be filtration or fractional distillation, things like that on the matter. And then there's this turning point called the conjunction, whereas the things that we're saving here, are brought together on a new level. And the opposites within them combine to create something entirely new called the child of the philosophers. And conjunction is a really important stage where things come together. And it's a fragile child at first, so it has to go through the operations which are above, the operation of fermentation, which is bringing new life into it. You can think of grapes as being a good example, how grapes are formed through these stages, being crushed and destroyed, and then allowed to sit and ferment, and new bacteria, new life is introduced to create the spirit of grapes, which is wine, of the essence of grapes. And that continues to distillation, usually shown by unicorn, which is, distillation is a really purification. It creates the purest possible solution from no matter how brackish anything was. Distillation in our lives is really where we reflect, where we distill our experiences and try to learn something from them, if you will. And the coagulation phase here is the rebirth of the child philosophers in an empowered state. The stone of the philosopher is usually shown as an androgynous youth, an androgynous being born. Here's the face of the alchemist. Some alchemists, like Jeff here, has a mirror here. A lot of alchemists did that in meditation. They use it to stare in this mirror like a mandala, trying to bring in all these symbols. And the triangle here is the sign for water, also divine grace coming down. The face of God, or the divine mind, hidden here as it is hidden in us. And the secret message around the outside of the perimeter here, visitor interior terra rectificando inuis occultum lapidum, which means visit the interior of the earth, visit the interior of your body, and rectify, and correct what you find there, and you will discover the hidden stone. And it's not expected. You know, it's going to be an unexpected event. It may seem linear here, but when the stone appears, it's always a wondrous event. Again, another principle of alchemy is consciousness is force in nature. And alchemists used consciousness in their experiments. They meditated, or at labor. They always had a section of their laboratory set up where they could meditate, a sanctum, a tabernacle often, where they could meditate as part of the experiment.
On the previous slide, I think the bottom part of the bigger triangles is that corpus, and then the upper right is spiritus. What is the one to the far left?
Anima.
Anima.
Which is a symbol of soul. Corpus is body, of course, with the 5 stars of the quintessence here. The body contains the quintessence. Interesting here, this is a symbol for, this is the word anima for soul and spiritus, and yet they're in opposite areas. I mean, you think that soul would be associated with moon and spirit with the sun. And it's a way of saying, and Carl Jung actually talked about this, and he gave it an impossible word. He called it in andrometria. And it means the changing of one thing into another, into its opposite. And that's what's going on here. The process of soul and spirit, mercury and sulfur, they change into each other. So it's really hard sometimes in an alchemical text to say that spirit or sulfur is solar. Sometimes it's lunar because it's changing back into the other. They keep changing into each other. And, you know, even in the laboratory, mercury and sulfur have a unique relationship. And soul too is part of this. It's changing. So they have a basic 3 here: salt, sulfur, and mercury. Again, the alchemical laboratory always had a place for meditation. It had a practical side and a spiritual side, just like us. We have to live in both worlds. But there is always this unified doorway that is open to us at the center of things, always, where balance can occur and the further work takes place. So this is the entrance to the plant level of reality. This is the left entrance to the other side, and it's access to the laboratory. And the laboratory is inside all of us as well as in the real world. Wolfgang Pauli was another mathematician, alchemist from the University of Vienna. He's the discoverer of neutrinos, and he had a lot of alchemical thoughts about the nature of neutrinos. And he pushed, he was a marvelous man. He had no ego. He gave away hundreds and hundreds of theories that could have gotten Nobel Prizes. He'd send them off in letters to his friends, and he didn't care about fame, he didn't care about salary, he didn't care about any of those things. He just cared about the truth. And he had a huge alchemical library. When he read Gödel's proof, he had the typical mathematician's crisis. And he went to Carl Jung in Switzerland because he knew Jung understood alchemical symbols, and they worked together. There's 400 of Wolfgang Pauli's dreams in Jung's big book, Alchemical Psychology, and he analyzed them. That was part of his therapy with Pauli. and they actually worked together on a book about psychoid events, or where consciousness affects reality, and a collaboration that was really, really great. And he pushed for this idea in physics that consciousness is what we're seeing. Our own consciousness is being reflected back to us in our experiments. And he was a great force for that. So we're back to our original drawing, and which carries with it, I think, wisdom. Wisdom's the idea here. Just the idea, just the possibility of wisdom in our lives and our world is the only thing that gives us hope for a possibility for change. If there wasn't the possibility of wisdom, there'd be no point to our existence. So, and alchemists knew this. They called themselves philosophers of nature, and they were true philosophers in the sense of the word, in the Latin sense of the word philosophia, lovers of wisdom. Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. So they weren't after truth necessarily, and I found this out. It's not truth with a capital T. It's wisdom, which can be dirty and hard-won, and it's not neat like mathematics. And wisdom comes from bottom up. It just appears. We just accumulate it, right? And that's Rembrandt knew this, obviously into alchemy too. But one of the most important symbols here. Here we see a basket, which is the center of this drawing, which looks kind of like a Tai Chi drawing.
Is there any correlation between the wisdom of the Asian, the Taoists, stuff like that, and there's this yin and yang, the light and the dark, and that all of that
it's
is
the same thing.
Consistent with the teachings from that.
Same thing. The Tai Chi is right here, and Taoist alchemy focused on the body. That's probably the biggest difference, whereas Western alchemy tended to focus on metals in the lab. But it was the same teachings, and there's, I think, a lot of evidence that it came from Alexandria. It went both ways, and Chinese alchemy too. I think it had one
from
source.
the ancient Egyptian,
from
that Mesopotamia.
Absolutely, from Egypt, I think. And there's a lot of papyrus and things where you get the exact same phrases in different countries. The Taoist canon, a lot of phrases that match the Emerald Tablet, pieces of the Emerald Tablet occur around the world. So I think it originated there. And in all these traditions, there was a process. This is actually, can't see it very good here, but it's a basket that's hanging on the wall. And the bottom of the basket is here. So the basket's kind of facing us. So that's another third axis in this drawing like we were talking about. It's projecting out towards us. So this basket is to collect what? It's to collect the wisdom. And that's part of the process. That's the central part of the process. All the changes going around it, light into darkness and change, it all accumulates here.
What's above the basket?
This basket is very important. It's telling you that you can do alchemical processes on yourself. Any alchemist looking at this drawing, and if you asked him what process is shown here, would say distillation. And in particular, a process called sublimation, which is really a beautiful process. You have this brackish, whatever it is, poisonous stuff boiling away, and it sublimates. Sometimes you can just put a solid object and heat it, and it'll sublimate. In other words, towards the top of the vessel, there'll be this spiraling smoke that goes up, and then on the side of the vessel at the very top is a powder that accumulates. And that powder is like the absolute most pure thing there is. If you do it with sulfur, it's called sulfur orientum, or the gold of sulfur. And they often call it the gold of whatever you're distilling. So sublimation creates something solid, something real, a new body that's perfected through the distillation process. And so always there's a sublimation vessel, and that's what this basket represents. So to simplify it, there's a process of distillation that can go on, and as long as this process, and sometimes distillations go on for months, you can accumulate something in your bodies, in Taoist alchemy, in the lab. You can accumulate something that's perfect, And it means that there's a possibility in us of creating a new body. A golden body is a second body, a new vehicle. Paracelsus called it the astral body or the star body. That's something real. That is something that can be done through meditation, through meditative distillation. And there's always a question about that. And I want to clarify that alchemical distillation, alchemical meditation is very different from meditations that you're used to. And I discovered that the hard way. Okay, I'll tell a story. I was really into meditation when I got into alchemy. I wanted to discover what they were doing because meditation is such an important thing in alchemy. So I went all over the world trying to study different kinds of meditation, Zen and Zazen and Taoist meditation. And I even built a isolation tank in my garage, took up half my garage and filled it with 800 pounds of magnesium sulfate and floated around in the tank and tried to deepen the experience. And mostly, it was very relaxing, but mostly I fell asleep. And I took psychoactive drugs and once to learn the experience and moved on. And I did have some profound experience, especially with the light and how it moved about, but it wasn't really giving me a process, So I got into transcendental meditation, and it was really popular back then. Everybody was doing it. And I want to say that transcendental meditation has helped millions of people. It just didn't work on me. And but I was going to give it a final test. And transcendental meditation is about stopping your thoughts, however you do it. You say something in your mind over and over again. The whole idea is focused on stopping thoughts, and as soon as you stop the thoughts, then all of a sudden you enter nirvana and this wonderful place. But it just never worked for me. And I decided one day when nobody was home, it was a Saturday, I got up early and I decided I'm going to sit there all friggin' day until this happens. I'm going to do the transcendental meditation and until, like Buddha sitting under the tree, I was going to have it happen. So I did. I got up early in the morning, started meditating, and worked on it. I didn't move from that spot, and did the breathing, and I got in this like catatonic state after about 5 or 6 hours. And it was where I couldn't move my arm, I couldn't move couldn't open my eyes. And I thought, this is great. It's the first time I got in that state where I was so disconnected from the body. I couldn't hear anything. My hearing was one of the first things to go. And I was really deep in meditation. But I still could think, right? But it was not thinking with a complete thought. It was like thinking with what was before the thought. I just had the feeling of the thought. And that, I discovered, would not interrupt the meditation. I still was working with knowledge in a weird way, but I never had an actual thought like I was speaking in my head. It was great. And then went on for another hour and a half or so, maybe 2 hours, and I still couldn't move my body, and I was kind of playing with that. Nothing spectacular occurred, so I decided I'd get out of this, and I'd start to, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. And then I got panicked. And then I was having thoughts. And I'm trying to open my eyes, and I'm trying to shake myself. And then I realized that the basis of all meditation teachings is about the breath, control of the breath. Because just for such circumstances as that, because you can always control the breath. I mean, it's the only thing we can really control. And you can enter meditation through breath, and you can leave meditation through breath. So I started doing, my breath was like very, very slow. So I deliberately and consciously increased my breath and got it going, and started trying to do the fire breath, like that to get me going. It was working, it was getting my circulation going. And finally I was able to open my eyes and pop them open. But just before that, I started hearing my breath outside myself. Mm-hmm. So I delayed opening my eyes, and I'm thinking, I'm having an out-of-body experience. Now it's going to pay off. And I'm going, and I hear coming back at me, and I could hear it very distinctly. So finally, I opened my eyes very slowly, There's my old English sheepdog sitting on his haunches, looking me right in the face, and he's going, trying to figure out what I'm doing. And I looked in his big brown eyes, and I realized he wasn't having any thoughts. He was where I was trying to get to. And he was already there. And it just shocked me out of that type of meditation. So I just really disappointed meditation. I didn't want to be a dog or have a dog's mind.
So he was probably assisting bringing you back.
Yeah. Well, he brought me back, but I didn't want to be back. Yeah, that's a true story. But so I went into.
Were you sitting or were you lying?
No, I was sitting cross-legged, and he was on his haunches. His name was Socrates. But so I did some more research. I went back to Egypt for meditations, anything on meditations, and alchemical meditations. And Paracelsus, I found more in meditations. And there is, alchemical meditations are active. They're not passive where you don't want to necessarily stop thoughts. You want to refine thoughts, and it's all about energy. So you start paying attention to energy, and at first you get a lot of images and things, but it's all unspoken and unspeakable probably. But the type of work you do is energetic, and it focuses on the energy behind thoughts. And you try to transform that energy or transmute that energy into a new level of consciousness. And that kind of work, it's like that's where that work has to be done. That what you realize in alchemical meditation is that meditation is a place. One day you're meditating and you realize, oh my God, this is a place. This is a real place where work can be done. And in that state, you realize what it is you can do. I get so angry with a lot of New Age gurus and teachers who say that you can just get whatever, ask for something and it's yours. That there's a shortcut to meditation, but you have to be in your own space. You have to break away from your body. You have to isolate yourself, and you have to get in the alchemical laboratory where you can even start the work. And so it's not about closing your eyes and wishing for something. It's because I know they're lying, because the things that you ask for, they say you can ask for a car, or you can lay that cute babe if you project far enough or deep enough, and you can get whatever you want, a new house, a new job, and power, and career, and fame. Those thoughts are too heavy in this place. You can't even have those thoughts in this place. They're like, they fall away. So I know they're not there. And what is in that place, the work you can do there, and the changes you can make and project, and especially in your own body, those things last forever. Because time itself is too heavy for this place. It falls back. And so meditation, if I had a message, it's meditation is a place, and you can get there, and it's not that hard, and there's work to be done. There's work for all of us.
From my own discipline, there's this relationship where if the mind can become quiet enough, and awareness can still be fully awake, that then there's this possibility of hearing from over there or from inside the heart, but only when the consciousness is quiet enough.
Quiet enough or pure enough.
Or clean enough for that all to come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
The techniques of the breath and the listening to a pin drop in the room over there next door, and the mind is really quiet enough, that can happen.
Yeah, but I think that's stages before you get to the pure place where the work can be done. I think
where's this place you're talking about?
Where?
It's outside.
It's within us. It's a conscious state. But it's working with light. It's working with energy, and it's accessing that layer. Mind is everywhere, you know. So why can't you access it? And I think that sometimes when you hear voices in meditation, and a lot of the images you see are just kinds of energy that are coming down to you. And I don't know that they're real voices coming from God or anything like that. I think that they carry information just like light does. And that's just my personal opinion, though. And I know that...
The only thing I would conclude from my conversation is I really do know when they're not mine.
Okay.
When what's coming at me is not coming from within.
Okay. Then how do you work with the voices? I mean, what...
Sometimes they're images.
Are they giving you information?
Sometimes they're chatter. I don't have any experiences that I would have, oh, this was.
Yeah, I know. But the information be coming about that. Remember, it's all about energy.
But it is that sense of this is some energy that's coming from somewhere that's not me.
Okay, that's it.
It might be you. It might be somebody sitting next door.
Yeah.
It could be on a random field of waves from somewhere. I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
What's the relationship between the one mind and mind? I've got something I really mind. I feel like, do I tap into it? Do I have a piece of it? Is it
Well, according to Gurdell's proof, his ontological proof, it's all the same. The one mind is evenly distributed, and it's beyond all the individual minds that we carry are part of it. But you're your individual mind too. The pattern of the whole universe is reflected in you. Your thoughts and feelings are the thoughts and feelings of the whole universe. You know, thoughts and feelings are the binary software that is our existence. So that pattern is as true in you as it is in the universe. And the thing is to make the connection between your individual consciousness and that one mind, just tapping into it. And there's no way of knowing it. You don't have to know it, but you share the pattern of that one mind. And that's where real alchemy takes place. That's where the real work's at. And like, I can see it in, Newton, some of Newton's writings about the meditations that he went into, and based on his own version of the Emerald Tablet, is very clearly he connected with that type of mind. And did his genius work come through on light like that? You know, he kind of hinted that it did.
We can get some more information about this book, because I'm getting to my meditations where sometimes they freak me out and I'll pop right out of them. I mean, it feels as if I'm going somewhere else.
Yes.
And when I feel that, it scares me and I pop back out of it.
That's usually like some type of reflected energy. So you need to work on purifying the consciousness more. So you need to start this dissipation operation where you go down into, however you visualize it, go down in the darkness. Don't be afraid of visions that are there. An example, do we have time?
Why don't you go 5 minutes?
All right. An example of that, when I was doing these meditations, I had one particular vision. The energy took the form of, I was going above and below, just like a distillation operation. In fact, that's how I started the meditation. And I went up and into the light, and I saw crystal structures there, and I saw this Mobius rainbow river that was like creating reality on one side, and they all had different meanings. I don't think they were really there. They were symbols with information. And that's what typical above type meditations are in the light. So I decided to go down into the body, and into the darkness. And I went down in the body for the first time, because I was always, unfortunately, focused on the light. And when I went down into the body, I saw all kinds of scary stuff. You know, things that, monsters and things that I knew would not hurt me, that I knew created. In fact, I couldn't even remember why I was afraid of that. You know, one was my traveling monster. I was always afraid of getting lost on the road because I travel so much, and getting lost in some city forever. But another one, there are things that are very real in that body meditation, because I'm down in matter, and one of them was I went to. Well, I just traveled throughout my body. I went to the ear and peeked out. But there was one particular place where it was really strong, was in my thigh here. And I went down to my thigh to see what was there, what was bothering me, because you feel it's all energetic. And I went down deliberately to my thigh, and I saw this eyeball, an eyeball like peeking through a hole in something. And it was so strong. And I stayed with it as long as I could. And then in meditation, I realized exactly where that came from. It came, we lived in South Chicago in this old tenement house, and we had in the basement a toilet area, and it was just covered by slats basically. And you went in there and did your duty. Well, I was watching a movie when I was about 10 years old called The Eye, where Spiral Staircase, and it's about a serial killer who goes around slashing up people in really bloody black and white movie. But just before he kills someone, they show his eye peeking in and looking at him, and then he proceeds to kill him. So I knew that was where that came from, and the reason it was imprinted in me so bad, and this may be a little gross, but after the movie, I went down to the basement to the bathroom, and I was urinating. And my father, the great prankster, came down, shut off the lights, and had a flashlight, and peeked through a crack, and shown his eyes. And I screamed, and I locked up, and my thighs just locked up powerfully, and I couldn't hardly move. And I sent that energy right here. I sent that eyeball, you know, and I realized that in meditation. I mean, that's a trivial example, maybe. But that's the kind of work you can do. And in meditation, you can travel to the organs. The organs are vessels, alchemical vessels, and they all have their own identity and feeling and energy to them. Mm-hmm. And if you have a kidney problem, or especially the liver, visiting the liver is an amazing experience, because it's like the repository of the soul. It's not only purification energies there, but there's a lot more in the liver than you think. And you can go to different organs, and that's how you should start the meditation. Maybe I'm confusing everyone, but we should do a meditation, maybe a guided meditation tomorrow if there's time, half hour, 45 minutes, and work through this, an alchemical meditation. We'll just go through it.
I was going to ask you, can you do that for us?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea, because I don't want to confuse everybody.
I was in a meditation, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, and I hit this state where I felt a presence. And it was kind of like I was trying to communicate with this presence, but I knew it was there. It would not communicate back with me. And then I got in a state of fear. And then I seen light and darkness. And in this, in this state, the darkness I wanted out of me, and I drew it out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, when I got all the darkness out of me, I was back. And then as soon as I came back, I popped right out of my meditation. But when I got up, I was so drunk that I couldn't hardly stand up. I was just totally, I was like a really drunk person.
Exhausted or just...
Exhausted, I was drained of energy, just bouncing off the walls, and I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, it sounds...
I think this kind of experience is really common, and maybe you could talk more about it with Dennis during one of the breaks, but we do kind of need
that's right.
to move forward. So I would just like to say thank you, Dennis, for sharing. After we take in, so much information.